Oliver
Good.
Pritchard.
Good evening, Brendan. For a minute there, I'm good. For a minute there, I thought we had a technical problem. I saw we were live and we weren't connected, which was a bit worrying. Anyway, how are you? How's life up in the north?
Oh, very well. It looked like you just got kind of beamed down from some unidentified flying object or something when it went live. Yeah, just like you fell into your chair. But you've had an eventful last hour or so, Ollie, have you?
Yeah,
Jeopardy.
my cat managed to fall into my fish tank, which was, less than ideal. That after a little while of stress, that's all been sorted out, and fingers crossed, everything seems to be good. She's stopped sulking, the dogs are being good, no fish are dead, which is a key thing. Everyone's happy.
Cats are obviously well known for not being great swimmers at all. So how did the cat manage to get out okay? You heard it in good time.
No, well, I saw it happen. She was lapping at some. I was doing lots of work in the fish tank. I'm putting in new substrate at the bottom, and so the cat was lapping at some, fallen out water on the table. One of the dogs ran up to investigate what she was doing. She jumped away towards the fish tank and managed to slide on. It was open, and there's kind of like two ledges at the top. She slipped on one of those, fell into the tank, managed to get herself back out. I think she pushed herself off the bottom. Water everywhere, Brendan. I honestly
had a watery week though, haven't you?
Yeah, well, let's all move swiftly on. It's not been the greatest of weeks.
Well, people might be wondering. We'll just say, in a word, leaks in houses. We've had a lot of rain,
and not for St. David's Day.
Indeed. Anyway, it might be a sign of things to come in April or whatever. But we shall move on. And on tonight's Bogotá Nights, everybody. It is Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, as you know by now. It's Bogotá by bus. Yes, this mode of transport is the most common, although usually not the most efficient way to get around the city. People may make a distinction for the Transmilenio, but we don't. It's just a bigger sized bus after all. We'll be giving you our take on the capital's mass integrated transport system, together with the old school colectivos buses. My favourites, eh? They may be a dying breed, but they're proven remarkably resilient to their phasing out all the same. It was meant to happen, I think, about 5 years ago, but on they rumble. For many, Bogotá's public transport system is one of its worst aspects. Do you agree, or does it have some redeeming features? For sure, insecurity is an issue, but on the flip side, what about that praiseworthy pass-the-payment practice on colectivos? Not a peso goes missing. Get in touch with us right now using the live comment facility and tell us about your Transmilenio travails, sit-up setbacks, or whatever transport tales you want to share with us. If you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet, the handle being at Bogotá Post, everybody's favourite English language newspaper in Colombia, with the hashtag Bogotá Nights. All that's to come in the second half hour, but first it's our run through some of the week's biggest news stories. There's been a somewhat curious call from a infamous, if you will, senator for former President Juan Manuel Santos to be stripped of his Nobel Peace Prize. More on that in a few moments. First though, Ollie, one could almost be forgiven for thinking that coronavirus has gone away in Colombia, if you're listening or watching the news. However, if vaccinating around 70 to 80% of the population is the key to a return to pre-COVID normality, we're a bit off that target, aren't we?
Yeah, look, I don't know what Duque was smoking when he decided to announce that he wanted 1 million people vaccinated by the middle of March. I don't think anybody thought that was a realistic aim, and it just serves to make him look stupid. I understand the point of wanting to project confidence, but for God's sake, don't be projecting confidence when you can't, when you've got no hope of delivering on it. All that's doing is guaranteeing people to see you as a failure, and rightly so, frankly. It is going fairly slowly. The Kovac vaccines have finally arrived. You know, they're not large in number. So, yeah, I mean, look, let's hope it speeds up. There are obviously problems. There's been, I think, a lot of very unfair criticism of hospital workers. You know, that there's people trying to say that there's corruption here, that they're stealing doses. And I think we need to be a little bit careful with that, because this kind of hyper-focus on possible corruption can lead to some problems. From what I understand, talking to friends who work in hospitals, it's fairly standard in vaccination that you're going to lose some doses. You know, people drop them, they get contaminated, there's all kinds of things like that. And I mean, I'm certainly not ruling out the possibility that some are being siphoned off. I mean, let's not completely ignore that. But also let's remember that 117,000 doses doesn't mean 117,000 going into somebody's arm. You know, there's a margin of error there for lost doses.
Yeah, actually, on that, Ollie, I saw a headline on Blue Radio yesterday, I think it was, where around 300 vaccines in Santander couldn't be used because they didn't have correct labels on them or something to that effect. So, yeah, that goes without saying. Just, I guess, to put some numbers on it, I would say by close of business tomorrow, going by a report again on Blue Radio, Noticias Caracol, that we'll have about 200,000 people vaccinated by the end of tomorrow. So, I mean, look, it's some sort of progress, but when you look at your home country, the UK, you look at Israel, which is going back to normality, you kind of think, well, we're way off target. But as I mentioned in the intro, yeah, go on.
You could look at Poland, you could look at the Czech Republic, you could look at Hungary. You know, these are all countries that are having problems and richer than Colombia.
For sure, and we mentioned last week, and I know we're kind of repeating ourselves, but it's our little vaccine and coronavirus update. And as I mentioned in the intro, Ollie, and you said this to me, you've noticed just in the last week, even since last week's show, that it feels like, bar, of course, you're not at the university giving classes, and a lot of the schools are still doing homeschooling and stuff like that, but a city more or less normal again.
Yeah, I think there's been a big... this week I've really noticed a difference, Brendan. I mean, I don't know about you. Obviously, we live in quite different areas. But certainly down here in, I think, what would be called, you know, a fairly commercial area, let's say. There's a lot of commercial activity. Things are really coming back to normal. I mean, I've thought over the past 2 or 3 days, every time I've been out walking down the street, I've thought there's a noticeably larger number of people. I was looking at the Transmilenio earlier today with one eye on our show tonight, and actually the number of people waiting on at the bus stations near me, KA45, it's okay. It's certainly nowhere near the pre-virus levels, nowhere near, but it's getting crowded again. It's getting congested again.
Yeah, well, I'll give my barrier update, and as I keep on saying, at times, since September, really, I've felt things have been moving steadily here. But I was in a local tienda on Saturday, just having 1 or 2 shandies, and the police came in and did the usual, can we have your cedulars? They didn't say anything about people having a few drinks in there. I mean, like, it's a small tienda, but small, you know, we're not talking about packed to the rafters, about maybe 6 or 7 people in there. And yeah, they didn't say anything about that. They just said there was a couple of people that were on the street, and they said, don't be on the street. If you're having a drink, be inside the tienda. And that was it, which was a marked difference from the week before, where they told us to get out of the tienda. So maybe the police as well are kind of going, well, people are just going to do what they want to do, and as long as it's not completely out of order, we'll let it go. A couple of interesting things as well, though, Ollie, are people should be aware of anyway. The land borders remain closed, so if people are thinking about heading, other foreigners or whatever, on a bit of a trip down to Ecuador or hopping into Venezuela if they dare, you can't do that at least until the 1st of June. So they remain off limits. And also the health emergency, which obviously matches this, runs until the 31st of May. And that just keeps on getting extended.
I was about to say it's extended and extended, yeah.
Yeah, so just I guess, dates to be aware of. Of course, you can still fly in and out of the country. I think it's easier to do it in Colombia than, for example, your home country and my home country in terms of if you wanted to fly back. But that's a story for another day. Anyway, by the way, you mentioned the Transmilenio. Remember, guys, we are going to be talking about transport, public transport in Bogota, specifically buses, Transmilenio, Citip, all that kind of stuff. The pros and cons, what's good, what's bad. Are you still a fan of the old colectivos? They're becoming fewer and fewer on the streets, depending where you are, of course, what part of the city. But do let us know your thoughts on Bogota's transport. We'll be getting into that in about 20 minutes or so. But Colombia and corruption are synonymous, Ollie, even though some of the locals always think it's worse than maybe it is. And at times they do make an example of certain people. And one of those has been the governor of Antioquia. What's he been up to?
Gabriel, yeah. Well, he's been. I'm sorry, by the way. A lot of my notes got splashed by the cat, as noted earlier. But yeah, he's been done for his part in. I mean, what this really comes down to, I think, is it's connected in many ways to Hidroituango, but that's not what he's being done for. It's officially for a cartel in paving over a road. I can't remember which troncal it is, but one of the sort of new roads in Antioquia that he helped he helped commission. It turns out that the people paving over that road, it wasn't an open tender, let's say. It was given out to friends of friends, etc., etc. Cost the public purse more than it should have done, etc., etc.
Okay, yeah. So he's been I guess that temporarily relieved of his duty. There's a governor in charge now in place. But even I heard today that governor in charge has said that Gaviria will be proven innocent with time. So it's the start of the case against him. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of toing and froing in different cases. So we shall watch that space. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, and maybe speaking of corrupt politicians or whatever, not that I'm making any sort of a link, but a certain senator from the Centro Democrático, Maria Fernanda Cabal, has called for our dear former president Juan Manuel Santos, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006, for that prize to be stripped from him because basically, Ollie, he doesn't deserve it. It was given to him too early, she said. You can't, how can you give him the Peace Prize when he didn't achieve peace at that stage? Although people might say Barack Obama got the Peace Prize, and what did he do? But anyway, what do you make of this? Maria Fernanda Cabal, well, she's no stranger to controversy anyway.
No, look, she's a clown. I mean, if you ever want to, sort of, if you ever want to sort of disprove the fact that going to a good or highly regarded educational institute makes you fit for office, just look at people like Boris Johnson or Maria Fernanda Cabal. These are prime examples of how top educational institutions regularly churn out absolute idiots. Anyway, I mean, to be fair, I actually kind of agree with her, but I think she's just for completely the wrong reasons. I do agree with her that actually Juan Manuel Santos is somebody who is a questionable Nobel Peace Prize winner. Let's not forget how linked he was to the falsos positivos scandal. He's a former justice minister. Let's not be glossing over that too much. But to say it, I mean, whatever else you may think of good old Juan Manuel Santos, he absolutely did sort of strive for peace. He was, by all accounts, he was the integral part in that peace process. Whether or not that overshadows everything else, whether or not you think the Nobel Peace Prize should maybe be awarded posthumously so that you know it's not going to be tainted. But to be fair, there's a good record of tainted winners, isn't there? We've got the Myanmarese lady in the lake, Aung San Suu Kyi. She's obviously, again, a political prisoner, but in the past, she's been a little bit suspect on the old Rohingya. And as Richard Stoller says, Juan Manuel certainly did more for peace in Colombia than Barry Obama did for democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And thanks for that comment, Richard. Always well received. And Giselle getting in early with her comments on colectivos. We'll get to that in the second half of the show when we're talking about transport in Bogota. I hear you though about being too tall for colectivos, but as I said, we'll get to that in the second.
That's all on our list, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, if we're having a go at Maria Fernanda Cabal in terms of being with the party that is in power, i.e. Centro Democrático, the party of our president Ivan Duque, the opposition called for a bit of a strange one, because as we've been talking for the last couple of weeks, basically.
Wait. Can I just bring on a quick thing here?
Yeah.
He very much isn't our president, though, is he, Brendan Corrigan? And I mean that not in the way that, people often like to, my mother's got a habit of saying, Boris Johnson isn't my prime minister. Well, if you take part in the voting process, he absolutely is. But as we're excluded from a large part of the political process here, it does irk me that I pay taxes, I'm a long-term resident here, and I'm not allowed to vote. That is slightly irking.
I'll note that one down. Duque's on my podcast list for an interview, as is Maria Fernanda Cabal. So I've noted that question down. We demand participation in elections here. Not that we'd make much of a difference, I think. Anyway, what I was going to say though, the opposition, because we've been talking about Marta Lucia Ramirez, the vice president, who it seems like the dogs on the street now know that she's going to launch her own campaign bid for presidency next year. She just hasn't officially announced it, so she will have to step down as vice president. And Roy Barreras has called to fill that vacancy when it does arise. It should be somebody from the opposition. Of course, there's no real opposition, but what he means is that people not from the Centro Democrático or conservative sides of things. It seems a little bit odd. It'd be a bit like Joe Biden losing Kamala Harris and deciding to get Ivanka Trump into the role or something like that.
Look, it just, has he taken leave of his senses? I just don't understand the point of a comment like that. It seems to me, it's chucklesome, but how on earth he thought that was going to happen, God only knows. Interesting comment here from Kieran Duffy, who I imagine is a fan of no taxation without representation, knowing his background. But he says here, I can vote in Ireland. Is that true? Because I can vote here, I'll be clear about that. I can vote in local elections. I voted for Bogotá mayor last year. But I'm not allowed to vote in presidential elections. And Kieran might be interested to know that he, if he moves to England, can instantly vote without taking nationality. It's a bizarre thing.
Yeah, as my brother who lives in London voted in the Brexit referendum.
Yeah, that's right. And instantly, it's worth just if anyone's listening, especially if any Colombians are listening. That's not all foreigners. That's specifically Irish people have always had the right to vote in British elections because they're an extraordinary thing. Anyway, sorry, we're getting sidetracked.
We are getting sidetracked, but a lot of historical links there as well. But yeah, the Irish system. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I have a few. I have one brother-in-law who is English, and yeah, he can vote, but as Kieran says, not for president. By the way, Alexandra Polaris thinks that's an interesting topic for a future show. Should we be given voting rights? How many? Well, of course, now if you include the Venezuelans in that would be another topic on its own as well. I think it would cause even more controversy, because I'm guessing.
Actually, a lot of those Venezuelans absolutely can vote, Brendan, because they have Colombian nationality. Let's not forget where the word Veneco comes from, the Venezuelan Colombians.
Yeah, don't get me started on that, because that's used incorrectly by so many people.
That's clearly not what it means now. It's like if I said, "Well, you're a gay fellow, aren't you?" We know what's meant by that in modern discourse, but it is an interesting thing to remember.
It is. Okay. Well, look, we were saying how it was a bit light on kind of the big news front this week, but maybe that's a good thing. But just a reminder, guys, as Giselle has already written into us about public transport and her thoughts on colectivos. We'll be talking about all of that in about 8 minutes' time. But we're going to move on to sport, and just a rather difficult week from a football perspective here, and it was covered in a number of media outlets, including Blue Radio and Caracol and El Tiempo, where we sadly lost Des McAleenan, now an Irish man, a man who I had the pleasure of interviewing last January 2020. He was the trainer for the goalkeepers of La Selección de Colombia under Carlos Queiroz, under his management team. He came in at the end of 2019. And when I interviewed a compelling character, Ollie, people use the term journeyman as a derogatory term in many ways, but he was a journeyman coach, but in a life that brought him all over the world, from the Middle East to the United States, to the delights of Belfast and Glentoran, and then here to Colombia in his dream job, as he described it. But he did have a number of difficulties, which he discussed openly in the interview that I had with him, and in other interviews that he conducted last year. He was battling with depression, and in a very difficult year that we had, of course, as you know, Ollie, the Colombian Selección, things didn't go too well for them in November, outside of the pandemic and all the problems. So Carlos Queiroz lost his job, and that meant, of course, that Des was also let go. But unfortunately, last week, the problems that he had became insurmountable, and we lost him. And I would just like to send my condolences to all his family and friends. As I said, he was a very compelling character. I got to know him quite well over the last 12 months. We exchanged a lot of messages and had a number of phone calls, especially when he was here in the country, even though we couldn't meet up during the pandemic times. We did meet up before that. And a very sad loss. Well, as we say in Irish, Ariesje Gorava Hanum, Gielish, may he rest in peace. But Ollie, we'll move on to sticking with soccer and football, but there is, of course, the small matter of, and it might seem trivial at this stage, but matches coming up at the end of this month, and we talked about this last week. And there seems to be more developments now, because Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have come out and said that they don't want to send their South American players here, because then they wouldn't be available for them coming up to a very crucial end of season stage in the Premier League. So there's now talk that, number one, the games mightn't go ahead, or number two, they won't go. They will go ahead, but they won't go ahead in South America. What do we know?
Well, FIFA protects. So I mean, there's this big thing that you can't stop a player playing for their country. However, FIFA have made an exception recently, because of the pandemic, which states that if a player would have to quarantine for 5 days or more of missed football, then you don't have to release that player. As all the sports people coming back in would have to quarantine for 10 days, that obviously gives them the right, under current FIFA law, to block the players going. Now, of course, that's potentially not going to be very popular with the players. Player power is a big thing. Certainly you can see somebody like Edison Cavani saying, well, my affiliation to Uruguay is greater than my affiliation to Manchester United. Who knows? And yeah, I mean, some football teams, you mentioned Klopp at Liverpool. While it's unlike Liverpool to whine. We very rarely hear Liverpool complaining, but they would be losing. Their first choice centre forward, Sadio Mane might or might not. It's a little unclear. I mean, part of this, Brendan, revolves around who's currently on the red list, and more to the point, who's going to be on the red list in 3 weeks' time. Now, Colombia's and all of South America basically is currently on the list. Parts of Africa, especially close to South Africa, that list might arbitrarily change. It might not. Countries might come on, they might go away. Portugal have already announced that they're going to play their game in Italy to get around this. But, it's also possible that the UK government will give an exception to elite sports people. But I think, look, this was clearly signposted. This was always going to be a problem. They've had a week and a half to start dealing with this problem. It still hasn't been dealt with. We've got 3 weeks to go. Let's see what happens. Postpone the matches, I think, is the key thing.
Yeah. I guess in an already congested calendar year, maybe that's something FIFA don't want to happen. But we'll see. As you said, you've got 3 weeks to kind of maybe come to a bit of a solution, and there might be elite status or whatever. But it goes on. By the way, you had mentioned yesterday. Well, no, there's another thing I want to say. We usually do a quick Everton watch. And I was looking today, Jerry Mina was injured. He wasn't part, but there was no mention of James Rodriguez whatsoever. Now, Everton did win, and they're up to fourth. They're still hotly in those Champions League places with a game in hand. But
I mean, it is worth mentioning here, of course, that Klopp and Solskjaer, they're sort of complaining because they've every right to. I mean, they're in serious danger of not making the Champions League this season on current form. It's not at all impossible that the two of them will both miss out. Losing again today, Liverpool. I mean, absolutely toilet form. Manchester City actually seem to be affected more than most, and then Guardiola's not kicking off about it yet.
Well, they're runaway leaders at the moment. That's it.
Anyway, where's James? I don't know. Ancelotti, I think, is doing a good job with James of acknowledging the fact he hasn't had as much game time in the last 2 or 3 years as you might have thought. And I think he's done a fairly good job of managing his minutes and doing well. He seems to be rotating him with Sigurdsson. I'd imagine that's what happened. But you'd have to ask the Bogotá Evertonians, Bogotá Toffees.
Yeah, we send out an SOS. Where is James Rodriguez? Wasn't even mentioned as being injured. Just wasn't mentioned whatsoever. Now, I'm very conscious that Richard Stollers has said that the bus would arrive in 8 minutes, and that was 8 minutes ago. And we're very punctual here, so I do want to get on to it. But you had said something yesterday, and mea culpa, I didn't check. But Junior de Barranquilla in the is it Copa America or Copa Libertadores? Not Copa America. Copa Libertadores? Okay, you don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody can write in and tell us how Junior.
The Libertadores, I think they just got an opponent. They've been hooked up with their opponents. Yeah.
Okay.
Start of that's it.
Anyway, well, look, we'll leave our news roundup at that, and we will get now to public transport. See that, Richard? We're bang on basically with time here. 8:30, 9:30, I should say. And we're going to talk about our delightful colectivos, sit-up buses, Transmilenio. Well, we might as well address Giselle's comment, seeing that she was quick off the blocks talking about colectivos. For the uninitiated, though, Ollie, if there are people listening from outside and don't know what colectivos are, just explain in a sentence or two what these wonderful buses are.
It could be anything, couldn't it? You could get one of those ones that's basically a glorified people carrier. Not even a kind of glory. I mean, 16 people they'll fit. They're tiny little things. But then they can be massive, great big ex-school bus sort of affairs. So, gosh only knows what you're going to get. They tend to be fairly small, fairly cramped. I mean, I certainly know the classic ones Giselle's talking about, and you very much do find yourself like this all the time. They are designed for dwarves or children.
Yeah, exactly. Or you stand at the steps at the back that let you out, or the steps at the front, and then you might have a bit of headspace in them. But I want to. We might as well stick with collectivos for a second because they are a dying breed. I think I've had my personal blog since the end of 2011. I think in 2012 I wrote a story of this. Oh, the phasing out of the collectivos and all these old buses, which was meant to happen in about 2 or 3 years. We're now here almost 10 years later, and there's still plenty of them around. Now, obviously, fewer of them than back in 2012 when they dominated the landscape, and big gas guzzlers with exhaust fumes that would darken the sky for minutes afterwards. But there's something. There's kind of something. Well, magical is not the word I want to use here, but I do like them in some ways because what are pros are also cons with the collectivos, and I'll explain. That
wait, can I just jump in very quickly here before you get onto this? Because I did love what you're saying about the provisionales, and what I want to know is, what do we think is going to end first? Quattro por mil, which again was a temporary measure coming in for a short fixed term, or SETP provisional? Because I honestly think we're going to go into I'm going to reach the end of my time in Colombia, and both Quattro por mil, which is a financial sort of instruments taxation, and the STTP provisional will be going strong. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Yeah, probably because money talks, and at the moment there's about a 400 peso difference between a standard ticket on a Cita Blue bus, so like the proper integrated public transport system, and then the old collectivos that are 100% privately operated. So that counts for people. If you're doing 2 journeys a day, that's 800 pesos a day, 7 days a week. So 4,800. What am I doing there? 6,400 a week. So it adds up. But anyway, I was just going to say what are pros are also cons. So, for example, you're walking on the street and along comes a collectivo. You just put out your hand. It doesn't matter where you are. The bus will generally stop if they want the customers. Of course, then if you're on said bus, because this is what I'm saying. So if you have to look at it both angles. If you're on that bus and it's relatively full, or the bus driver's in a hurry, he may not stop for that person on the street. But then if you're on the bus and you're in a hurry, you're kind of going, go bus driver. I like this bus driver. He's not stopping for anybody. He's just moving along. Back in the day, I don't think this happens anymore. You could wave a 1,000 peso note, 1,000 peso note in the air to signify this is all I have. And a lot of the time they would stop and let you in the back door so you wouldn't go through the ridiculous turnstile that many of these have at the front to signify, that you got on for half the price or even for free on some occasions.
It's worth noticing, actually, the fact that they will stop anywhere and everywhere. I can see the pros and cons for the passengers. Certainly for everybody else on the road, it's a bloody nightmare. It really, really contributes to congestion in the city that you've got all these buses constantly pulling over, constantly blocking people, constantly forcing people to change lanes, etc.
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. And I've been cycling a lot more the last few months as well. You've got to have your wits about you. These guys will swing in, swing out. Now, I'm not saying that the sit-up drivers are anyways better, but at least you know they're going to stop at the appointed bus stop, whereas the collectivos will stop pretty much anywhere. Well, just a couple of the comments coming in there. As Alexandra said, she was on to the idea that I mentioned, that you can get a discount if you don't have the full fare. There was another kind of thing that I liked back in the day of collectivos, because I haven't been on them that much of late, obviously in the pandemic year that we've had. But on the odd occasion, I used to take this route quite regularly out the 26 Avenida 26 El Dorado. And the bus driver kind of got used to me. And then one day he said, come up and sit alongside me. Now, that's usually reserved for attractive looking passengers of the
It very
female
much
variety.
is, yeah.
Yeah, but I got lucky that particular day. Well, lucky in inverted commas, if you want to put it that way. Anyway, yeah. So the colectivos, they kind of have, yeah. There's a little bit of nostalgia, obviously, to them and the way they operate. But in terms of congestion and all that kind of stuff, now there is one little link, Ollie, I would say, between the colectivos and the new sit-up buses, and it's the signs at the front. They don't want to do away with these actual physical signs because they're kind of part of Bogotá culture. I mean, you can get fridge magnets and things like that at the airport with the signs, like these very colorful signs displaying or announcing where the bus goes, which are kind of difficult to read if you've no idea.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, actually, you know, you are expected to have a fairly encyclopedic knowledge of barrios in Bogota. And barrios, of course, are often really small. Let's not forget that, you know. In fact, almost nobody knows the name of the barrio I live in. You know, everyone I speak to says, "Oh, you mean you live in the Javeriana?" And I say, I had to write the linderos of my apartment. I very much know it's in Sucre, thank you very much, but yes. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, you know, God knows what you're meant to do if you're a visitor to Bogota. And let's not forget, this isn't about speaking Spanish. This isn't about being Colombian. This is very much about A, being Bogotano, and B, knowing how Bogota is laid out. You know, when you see, it's going to La Felicidad. Well, aren't we all? You know, it's just, oh yeah, no, I mean, I've had friends from Medellin come and visit and say, "Oh God, I don't know where anything's going," and I can sympathise, frankly.
Yeah, well, in fairness, and Richard made a good point there that they had the signs because the provisional buses, well, at least at the start, but this is still the case. I mean, it's still pretty difficult using the sit-up as well if you're not that au fait with the city where they go. Like now they have infrastructure, they've got the bus stops, but there's such a dearth of information at the bus stops. Like, it seems rather simple. And like nowadays with GPS and all this kind of stuff, but it's almost like they're leaving it to the passenger, him or herself, to do all the dirty work, in a sense. It's like, well, sure, they've all got smartphones now, they're fine. Again,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is part of a wider sort of, I know I shouldn't climb on my soapbox too much, but it is part of a wider thing where there's a real abdication of responsibility from a lot of providers these days, where they try and pass everything on to end-level consumers to say, "Oh well, you know, it's your job to download the application. It's your job." Yeah, okay. What if I'm at the bus stop and I don't have data? And it's, you know, it's 10 o'clock at night and the tenders are all closed and I can't get data. You know, okay, well, I know I can get let's say a 179. Well, where does that go? I mean, I know it's going down the Septima because I'm on the Septima, but I don't know where it's going next. And yeah, I don't understand, Brendan, why they can't invest. I mean, we're talking about a tiny investment. Just print out some route maps, whack them on the bus stops. You know.
Yeah, no, it's true. I know people will say, "Oh, but can't you can ask the bus driver and they'll always tell you the passengers." But again, number one, if you're here and your Spanish isn't excellent and you're trying to ask these questions, you may not understand exactly. So that's one issue. So it's not exactly making the city tourist friendly if you want to use public transport. So you're kind of pushing people to use taxis and other forms of transport like that, which adds to congestion. I mean, to me, a good sign of any city is that if you can easily use its public transport system, no matter where you come from, whether you're just a visitor or you're living there. Yeah, so certainly there is a dearth of information. It's something that they could certainly do well in improving. And yeah, like just maps at every bus station and things like that. There is one other thing that bugs me with the sit-up, and I know we're getting a host of comments coming in here on this, but at times they don't stop either. So we give out about the colectivos kind of being a law unto themselves, but at times they'll just fly by. Obviously, maybe it's just the culture here. They're kind of going, "Oh, I don't feel like stopping at this bus stop now." So,
well, I think it's Alexandra mentioned earlier that the drivers are all the same. I mean, that's semi-true. A lot of those drivers were sort of taken on by the SCTP. I think as a cyclist myself, I think one of the really big worries is that the SCTP drivers have quite the death toll on cyclists. You know, there's been quite a few that they've hit and killed, and that's kind of worrying. Well, that is worrying, in fact, we can say. But I think those. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, because I was putting out, and it's referring back to the collectivos before we completely move on, but because we have a few kind of old Bogotá heads here, or people who were in the country decades ago, you know, we're kind of talking about a law unto themselves, collectivos. But let's be honest, they do have these guys with their clipboards at every kilometer or so. But I'm always wondering, like, what exactly are they noting? And they always say something to them, and then they throw them like 500 pesos or something. That's their pay every time a bus passes. But obviously it's to keep track of where they're going. And then that can be another frustration, because sometimes they'll stop and have a chat for about 10 minutes and you're like, I'm already, close to the time of my next meeting or whatever, and you're tearing whatever's left of his hair.
I think it's to check, basically, that the drivers aren't just pissing off and doing their own thing. I think that's the idea behind it.
Okay.
Like they're not taking detours and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, because at times they will, like, this has happened to me when I was living up here, like 183, and taking the collectivos further south. And when the traffic was just so bad, at times they would swing back roads just to get back onto the Septima and avoid a lot of the traffic, which, of course, when you're sitting on the bus, you're kind of going, excellent. If you're waiting for that bus in the part that's been skipped, it's kind of going, where the hell is the bus? So, yeah, obviously it works.
And Alexandra's just confirmed that. She says it's to keep the rate of passengers versus time distance. And this actually, I think, is one of the biggest problems of the collectivos. And it's something that I feel fairly strongly about, which is that the collectivos are just going to go where there's money to be made. And the worrying thing there is that there are some places that, for various reasons, whether it be security or whether it be a lack of passengers, just collectivos won't go because there's not money to be made from it, or it's too dangerous to make money. And because of that, that means already very disadvantaged people get further disadvantaged. I think one of the great things about the SCTP is that it goes roughly, okay, look, it's not perfect. We're never ever saying things are perfect, but credit where it's due to things that function in Colombia. And one of the things that functions about the SCTP is that it covers areas of the city that weren't always covered before.
Yeah, definitely a fair point. That's where you kind of need the public system to serve those routes that private operators just, as you say, wouldn't be bothered if it doesn't bring in the loot, or the lucas, as they would say, then they'll leave it be. Now, Richard has mentioned the Transmilenio, and he says people who curse it don't remember what this city was like before. And of course, the Transmilenio came into being at the turn of the millennium, so I wonder what things were like in the 1990s. Now, of course, the population of Bogotá has shot up considerably as well in the last 20, 30 years. But it is the oft-criticized, much maligned Transmilenio. Ollie, you have a saying for it. You say it's a fine.
Oh, yeah, it's a wonderful secondary system, yeah. As the main transport system of a city the size of Bogotá, it's an absolute disaster. But as a secondary system, actually, I think it works quite well. And actually, I think it would work better if there were more routes and stuff like that. But yeah, to have it as a primary... look, it's a secondary source of transport in Medellin, which is a city a third of the size of Bogotá. That kind of tells you how it should be operating.
Yeah, of course, we said we're not going to talk about things that we don't have in this city yet. So people will say, well, wait, there's a metro on the way. And of course, construction as well.
Wait, what do you mean there's one on the way, Brendan? There's signs down there on the crackers saying, aquí el metro. Aquí es una estación de metro.
I think, as I mentioned before, don't get confused between the tienda, the supermarket, metro. That's what they're signposting for there. But the Transmilenio, for all its ills, like as you say, it is a good secondary system, and if you're kind of using it at the weekend, it functions because it's not it's not over capacity.
Well, or at the moment, actually. And I think we do need to rewind. Both Alexandra and Richard in the groups, in the chat here, both of them have mentioned, look, it was a nightmare before the Transmilenio. And I have no doubt that that's true. I absolutely like. If it's a bad primary system, it is at least a primary system. I mean, not having it at all would just be an. I have no idea what the streets would be like.
Oh yeah. Well, I 100% agree. And now Richard as well, and you always like a dig at Medellin, Ollie. Unlike me, I love it. But he's kind of going, you can't compare Bogotá and Medellin. Medellin is
No. Well, yes and no. I mean, I often hear this said, "Oh, Medellin's a lineal city. You know, it just goes down the river, blah blah blah." Yes and no. Bogotá is very much a north-south city. There's no doubt about that. You'd never, if you think about what's traditionally called the centre, what is there east of the centre? There's absolutely, literally just hills. You go through a couple of barriers and then boom, you're in hills. And it sprawls across to the west, absolutely, but it really does run north and south as well. I do agree with Richard. But actually, it should be easier in Bogotá to make a grid system than in Medellin, where everything's bottlenecked into one centre.
I have a quick little point to make on that, and Richard Stoller, I think, who is a historian, will probably chip in with this as well. But the former mayor back in the 50s, Fernando Mazuera, if I'm getting his surname correct there, because I was just reading the book on Virgilio Barco, the biography by Malcolm Days. And there's a point here where this Fernando Mazuera, the former mayor, he kind of has a go at the Spanish who designed the city, and he said, well, apparently they followed the routes where the donkeys walked, and he said if you look at the Septima and the Decima and Trece, they're all just like going north to the point of where the donkeys walk to get the water, and they all merge basically at this point, which is. Now I think the Bavaria, now this was from the 50s. He was making this.
Donkeys walk in surprisingly straight lines, it turns out.
There you go. Exactly. But the problems with we were talking about this yesterday, Ollie. Like, if it was to work a bit better, take Autopista Caracas, you'd basically have to take over the whole, especially the Caracas. It would just have to be completely. Devoted for Transmilenio and nothing else left for that. The Autopista, you'd have to at least sacrifice another 2 or 3 lanes each side, make the stations far wider and in places longer, because again, at rush hour, at peak times, in the stations, you can barely move.
They're absolute health hazards at times. Again, this is all pre-COVID, and those days may yet come back, who knows. But yeah, no, look, I mean, I have felt a number of times at rush hour on Transmilenio, there's a safety issue here, because people pour into the station. It's way over capacity, and buses are coming along. They can't fit anybody on. They can't squeeze people on, and of course we're just pouring more and more and more people into the station, and very quickly it becomes too crowded. I'm frankly amazed people don't fall out of the platforms more often.
Yeah, and like when you think about it, those the glass walls of the stations too, they're not exactly the strongest in the world. I mean, I know they have some like metal barriers up too, but like it's all very kind of monorail-esque, very lightly designed system too, but completely again, as one of the comments says there, like it was designed for a certain number, and now it's well over that, so it is completely over capacity. Even like, forget about peak times. If you were on a normal Wednesday afternoon back in normal times pre-COVID, it was still pretty. If you were at the popular spots, like it would be busy enough at those places. Of course, there is cultural things at play here as well, Ollie. Behaviour, and some people, they get to the door where or the opening at the Transmilenio station where their bus is going to stop, and their bus may not come for another 10 minutes or 10 buses, but they will not move.
Those are the sort of people that just make me think this is why society doesn't function. This is why there's dog shit in my local park. It's because of people like you. Yeah, no, I just don't understand. Look, I understand you're worried, you don't want to filter through, you're worried about people. Okay, fine, but just move to the side at least. Do you know what I mean? Like, and the worst one is when people are getting off the bus and they still won't get out of the way. You're thinking, for the love of Christ, somebody getting off a bus is not trying to push in front of you. They're trying to leave the station. And I think we do have to temper things. Look, let's not forget, if we're talking about the London Underground system, there is nobody even close to being alive who can remember a London without an underground train service, let alone the omnibuses. So, we do have to remember that I imagine the London Underground was just like this in the sort of late 1800s. And it is worth remembering, it takes a while, we're only just getting adults now who have grown up always having a Transmilenio. They're still young adults. So I think it will take time to get in, to get the culture in. I certainly would say in my 9 years in the city, I do see a difference between the Transmilenio 9 years ago and the Transmilenio today in the way people behave.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't had to use it that much in the last couple of years, thankfully, because I've been close to where I worked, and obviously the last year I haven't needed to travel that far because there's no office to go to. But yeah, and also they have redesigned the actual buses themselves, so there's a little bit more space. Like they've put the seats parallel, to the windows and stuff like that. So they're not taking up as much space in the aisleway. So you've got more foot room in them, which helps in that sense. But it is, we're talking about that station, in the station. I wrote an article a few years ago, was saying that one way we would do it whenever there's no bus coming, that like spikes would shoot up from that zone in front of the door that opens, so no one could stand there. That was my strange mind thinking in weird ways that could be a preventative measure. Of course, one thing that we do have with the Transmilenio, Ollie, is a cable car system, less well known than Medellin's or perhaps Manizales as well. But you can, and of course it's a normal, people go for tourism reasons, but it functions as public transport and much required for very poor areas of the city down the south. Neither of us actually have used it amazingly yet, but it's there. And I think just for the price of normal fare.
Petrocable, yeah.
Petrocable, yeah. There you go. But I mean, I think by all accounts, it's been positively received. Oh
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, Medellin proved this, years ago. Look, if you've got people living at the, up the side of a mountain, as you frequently do in Colombia for obvious reasons, yeah, cable cars are an absolutely excellent way to go. They can't be affected by traffic. Yeah, okay, their capacity is tiny, but for some places, I mean, just road access is non-existent.
Yeah, exactly. But just to get a few of the comments there, Richard and Alexandra are firing in the Bogotá or the Colombian long-termers. It's from Tonal, the
up to Ciudad Bolívar, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Alexandra just giving a shout out to former Mayor Mocus that he tried to educate the masses here that they didn't even know how to cross the street. And
I'll flip this one slightly back on Alexandra. What she might be surprised at is that actually Mocus is relatively famous outside of Colombia. I certainly knew Mocus's name a long time before I'd ever really thought about Colombia in any significant way, before I had any Colombian friends or any kind of connection to the city.
Okay. Can you explain more? Ollie, why?
Oh, I mean, well, he's a legend in sort of city planning circles. People talking about city planning and effective local government always mention the name of Mokas. And it's worth mentioning, incidentally, that the Transmilenio is actually fairly well received outside of Colombia. You know, I have friends back in the UK who is sort of city planning and transport people. And they always say, oh yeah, people are always banging on about the Transmilenio. It's an excellent kind of alternative to building expensive metros underground, that sort of thing. And I always say, yeah, tell you what, come here at rush hour, talk to some regular people rather than reading the PowerPoint slides. You might get a slightly different impression. It's like, you know, I've certainly read a number of reports from foreign people visiting Bogotá where they say, oh, but we took the Transmilenio at 11 and it was a dream. And I think, yeah, it probably was. Take it 5 hours earlier, you might find it be a little bit different.
Yeah, well, to be honest, just talking about kind of traits on transport here and different things, the one thing I forgot to mention with the colectivos was that praiseworthy practice, I mentioned it in the introduction, but of when you have to cram in the back of the bus because you can't get in the front and you pass your fare up. And even if you give like 20,000 pesos, it'll get passed up and your change will come back down along. And I would say hardly ever is there a peso missing.
And I will raise you another thing. In the city where apparently there's so much crime, you can't trust a single person, everyone's out to get you. Actually, on public transport, you just dump your bag on a stranger's lap, and that's that. It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
That happens on the Transmilenio or buses. That happens everywhere. Exactly.
It's almost like actually people are relatively honest. Most people, isn't it? Who'd have thought it?
Now, get out of here. That could.
And come on, Brendan. I think we've got one thing to mention, which I know everyone's been waiting for. The one thing on a Colombian bus that everybody talks about. What is it? Oh, Richard beat me to it.
Well, he got in there. Oh, yeah. The hot seat, of course. Well, we did mention this in a previous episode, and I meant to check, and I forgot. We talked about kind of Colombian traits and cultural quirks and things like that. So we did mention the hovering over the hot seat as well, where I'm sure I expressed my anger that at times I would just feel like going over and pushing them down.
Sit down, for God's sake, yeah. Well, you know, no one's got weak quads if they've travelled on a Colombian bus, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Great workout. Okay, we are coming up to the time. I know Sophomaro, our producer, will be right.
No, he's not.
Yeah, he must be sleeping. But just one other thing. Like a lot of the time, if I'm far away from home socializing in the city, I'm always kind of, Transmilenio is going to be closed. What I'm getting at, Ollie, is that why don't we have a 24-hour public transport system? For
security, I'd suppose. I think it's a combination of security and the fact that, I mean, let's remember, Bogotá's really not a 24-hour city. I mean, certainly not in the week. You could maybe get away with it at the weekends, but in the week, who would be taking it? I think.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I was actually thinking that too. Like I wouldn't be out that late most nights anyway.
Well, I mean, I think look, it's what it always comes down to, Brendan. Are you going to pay a lot more tax? That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Let's not live in a fantasy world. Are you going to pay a lot more tax to run all these buses all through the night? But anyway, that's the end of our that's the end of our chat, I think.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. Yeah, writing in, guys, with all the comments. Thanks a million. Until next week. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.